Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today we are doing file inclusion on Hack the Box Academy. Now, this is not actually in any of the paths that I saw. I just chose this one because I'm going to actually show you in this. One of my favorite attacks ever is in here, and we're going to talk about it, and that's the log poisoning. And it's one of my favorite, and I'll discuss why. It's not complex. It's very easy to understand. But I realized when I talk to people and they talk about local file inclusion, a lot of times they understand the very basic concept, but they don't think outside the box with it. They don't get creative. And that's where you see where one pen tester will find a LFI or even a remote file inclusion, and another pen tester is like, it doesn't exist, right? And you see this a lot. And I've ran some of my CTFs over the years, and at the end of the year, and there's been file inclusion that nobody's found, and it's because it's not as simplistic as first thought. So I wanted to talk about it, kind of discuss it, go through it, and walk through this box and see if it helps you guys. So first thing is, where do we find it most often? And that is in templating engines. So with templates, right? And that's because, there's local file inclusion. Usually it includes the vulnerability itself is a misconfiguration, right? It's not usually like designed incorrectly. Like the system is doing what it's supposed to do. You didn't turn a setting off, right? Or you allow it to reach out remotely when it doesn't need to, that type of thing, right? So what is local file inclusion? Well, if you don't know how systems work, it may not make sense, but the name itself tells you exactly what it is, right? Local meaning it's only on the machine, and they talk about remote file inclusion in here, but they're focusing on local. So local meaning it's on the server itself, right? File is a file. Inclusion, so you are able to view or include a file in the system that you really shouldn't be viewing, right? So you're viewing a file that's not necessary. So let's go ahead and start the machine real quick before we get too deep into it. Well, we'll start on the next one. Okay, so basically, when you go to a page, right, it looks like this, and then you have a question mark, and that's usually a variable. Well, the variable page equals about is saying you're on the about page. Well, what if there's other files on that server that I want to view? Can I reference them here and get it to show me what they are, right? And then take it a step further and do remote code execution, which is exactly what it sounds like. We can run code on the machine because the machine's allowing us to reference things, right? And that's what we're going to talk about. So examples of vulnerable code. So we're going to go through each example. So in PHP, you get this include function, right? Include get language to load a local or remote file as we load a page. So if the path passed to the include here is taken from a user controlled parameter, which here it's saying get, so they're asking us for the path, right? Well, if you're asking me to give you the path and you're not sanitizing anything, I can give you a path to a file, any file on that system. And if it has access to it, it will give it to me, right? Because it's asking me for the path. So that is kind of the vulnerability and the whole risk enveloped there. So then you have I'm not going to walk you through, read every single thing. And there's other variants of this, and we'll talk about that. But then in JavaScript, right? Same kind of thing. As you can see, whatever parameter passed from the URL. So here, where they're actually saying they want the parameter to get from you, the read file, right here, it's being passed by you. And they say in the URL, so like you're thinking not by you, but you can change a URL. You can make it say anything, right? And if we go back to here, where we see if I can find it here, there we go. This, right? If this is at the end of your URL, what's to stop you from changing that? Just because they referenced it there and they had you redirect to that URL when you click about, doesn't mean you can't change it. So you can reference whatever file you want. And you'll see this in person, or in action. So if you think that like it's not making sense yet, just give it a sec. You'll get there, hopefully, right? So you got your JavaScript, your Node.js, right? And they're just showing you the actual functions here. Typically, when you're actually doing a pen test, unless you use LFI to access the source code using encoding or something, you're typically not going to see the source code, so you don't know what the code looks like. This is more if you're like doing an app check or something before publishing, that you would see this code. There's ways to get the code, and we're going to show that too, but I'm just saying, typically you would be testing this before you're actually going and viewing the code. But you can see here, where get parameters were specified after a blah. In the URL, the above example takes the parameters from the URL path. So here's the path, right? As the parameter is directly used within the render, which is right here, function to specify the rendered file, we can change the URL to show a different file instead. So these are all examples. The reason I'm only just showing them to you, not really talking about them, is because we're going to go through how to do this. Just seeing it is fine, but you want to actually see how this works, right? So read versus execute. So here is why it matters. If you have these specific functions, you can do these specific things, right? You can read with all of them if improperly configured, but you can't always execute with all of them, and you can't remote URL with all of them. And you'll see why that matters here shortly. So let's go ahead and get into it. Thank you. Okay, local file inclusion. So let me go ahead and start the machine. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the video. I just want to let you guys know that the way I can do these videos is from your support, whether you subscribe, like the video, or use the Patreon below, or join the Discord. The only reason I can do these is because of that. That's why I do giveaways in Cyber Awareness Month. That's why I do end of the year events where I do giveaways and things like that. It's all because you guys make it possible. So please check them out if you can. Support the channel. I don't take any of the money. I'd give it all back. So feel free to join, and you get just more resources as time goes on. So I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and walk through it. So you can see here, they go ahead and they go to this inlanefreight.com, and they click on language, right? And they're just looking at switching from English to Spanish, whatever, right? So they switch on English, and you can see that changes the URL up here. The URL now says index.php, question mark, and then the variable is language equals, in this case, es.php, which is espanol.php, right? So they changed that, and then you can see it changes to Espanol. Well, that PHP file is a specific file that is rendering this in the same thing, but in Spanish. So what if we change that es.php to another file? Well, what's a globally readable file that we all use and we all look for when we're doing pen tests, right? Etsy password file. So what do? We just go in here to index.php, language equals Etsy password. And if you look, it prints out the Etsy password file. Now, some people might say that never will happen. I can promise you that's happened so many times on pen tests because companies prioritize external facing sites. And once you get internal, this is common because security has exemptions. There's a reason they have to go to production, et cetera, et cetera. So this is actually extremely common that LFI works because it's working by design. The configuration is set up to allow this. It's not a flaw in the way that the application works. It's designed this way. So you need to change it and configure it differently if you don't want it to happen. So now you look, we see that this is the absolute path, meaning we're going directly Etsy password. Well, one of the ways they can get rid of that is say, you know, hey, you can't do anything outside this directory, right? Like basically, this is the path that we want you to go to, right? So you can see here, include language, right? So they're changing it. In this case, if we try to read Etsy password, then the include function would fetch the file directly. However, in many occasions, this is where, again, you guys start getting creative. Web developers may append or prepend a string to the language parameter. So the language parameter must include /language. Okay, and then when they do it, look at this. You get failed opening, languages, Etsy password for inclusion. Well, as expected, we get an error, right? Now, normally the website shouldn't be showing this much of the error information, but what can we do? Well, we can instead of say, give us the absolute path, right? We can do a relative path, meaning we can do .. // because that's going backwards in the directory, right, for the system, but it started in the language directory, which is the correct directory. So it's actually thinking, oh, they're staying in the directory we asked them to. But if you notice, we're actually telling it to go back, in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4 directories, and then call out the etc password. So you'll see this quite often, the // that's the back one directory in Linux. So that's why it's allowing it, because you are starting in the directory that they specifically call out. So this is where you got to start getting creative, because attackers, right? It's a cat and mouse game. The defenders are going to put a filtering system. You find a way around it. Okay, so it can always be useful to be efficient and not add unnecessary ... several times, especially if we're writing a report. This is true. So what they mean by this is always try to find the minimum number. So what they mean by this is if you're just testing it and you put 50 ... slashes, it doesn't really matter because you're just testing if it works. But if you're trying to show a report, right, you want it to be the issue in hand, right? The exact issue, which is I can directly reference that by going ... slash ... etc password. You don't want to be like, we put in this huge payload and we got a result, because it's just not efficient, right? Because usually if you're doing a pen test and you present this as a finding, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to go try and do it too to verify what you found. Well, if they can't reproduce it, or if they look at it and they go, oh God, this is huge, we're not going to do this, right? Or maybe they think like this is a very specific thing that has to occur. It's not really specific. You can do it very easily. An example would be like if you made a huge command like this long and they're like, okay, an attacker has to be very specific to get this to work. And you'll see there are attacks that do this. But in this case, you could have done it with a command this big. And so you want to make sure that you're actually showcasing what the real minimum is. And is it a silly kind of thing? Yes, but I think they actually make a very good call out, right? You're talking about efficiency. If you do this on 500 servers, your report now becomes much larger and it becomes a lot less readable. If you do it on 500 servers and you have just the minimum, it starts getting, because you got to think how many different vulnerabilities you're discovering, it starts really helping out. So I think that's actually a really good call out. So now the file name prefix, right? Include language, get language, right? In our previous example, we used the language parameter after the directory, so we could traverse the path to read the password file. On some occasions, our input may be appended after. So what that means is they're going to add something to it, right? For example, it may be used with a prefix to get the full file name. So what does that mean? Look at this. They did the same thing, etc password, right? And you can see no such file or directory. Well, why is there no such file or directory? As expected, the error tells us the file doesn't exist. That's because they appended the file, right? So they added something to it. So, okay, let's figure out what they added, right? So now, look at that. They prepended with language. Well, then we try to do this, the ... but we're not telling it anything about a directory. So what we're doing here is we're basically saying, hey, they're going to add something there, or in this case, prefix, so they're going to put it beforehand. Let's put a slash, so we say, and we're going to go back a directory. We're basically closing the loop on that command, because if you think about it, how that command looks, right? If we go over here to our executable and we open up our, come on, there we go. We want to open up like let's just think of, trying to think of an easy, there we go. We'll just go in here and say, we'll just do Vim. So if we were to go in here, make this really big so you can see it, right? The path that you're looking at is, because we'll open up Terminator as well. So we'll go ahead and make this bigger. There we go. And we will say, yeah, we'll just do this. So if you think about it, in Linux, right, what you're doing, if we open up Terminator and look, no, thank you, not right now. I'll update later. So if you think about it, what you're really doing is you're saying, hey, cd, and then etc password, right? That's what you're telling it to do. And it'll work here, right? Or in this case, we're saying cat, not cd, sorry. That'll work. But what they're saying is if they prepend it, if they put something right here first, you need to close the loop on that and say, put an extra / in there to say, hey, we're starting a new directory, quote unquote. In this case, we're starting the directory here. So you can see that worked. So same thing here. What you're trying to do is make it, and I didn't even, I need to put escape, enter. All right. All right, there we go. Okay, so we can close this. You guys can see that basically they're going to prepend it or prefix. They're going to put something before. So we need to put that / to go ahead and continue ours. On the flip side of that, if you need it on the end, if they're going to add something, for instance, add language to it or something, we just need to add that in there. All right, so this may not always work, as in this example, a directory named lang may not even exist, which is true. If they prefix it with something and we put a / there and it doesn't exist, it's not going to find anything, right? Any prefixes appended to our input may break some file inclusion techniques. All right, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about wrappers and remote file exclusion and stuff, or inclusion. Okay, appended extensions. So this is one that you see quite a bit, is like, if you look, they put etc password here. And if you look, that now mind you, you're not going to usually receive an error this verbose. You're not going to see something like this. But what they're showing is the error actually shows it's looking for a PHP file, the password.php. You put etc password, it's looking for etc password.php. So it's adding .php to the end because it is expecting a PHP file. So it's another way to say, hey, we only want it to upload or to reference PHP files, right? So we're going to talk about how we bypass those as well. Okay, so now then there's second order attacks. So as we can see, LFI attacks come in different shapes. These are one of my favorite attacks too, because this is something that developers forget about all the time. This is one of the easiest ones to find because people forget about them. They don't think about them. And that is, so second order means the second thing you're doing basically. So you can see if I create a profile, right? And this is just an example. This isn't the case. But if I create a profile and I name it Stuffy whatever, right? Stuffy24. And then I reference my avatar, which is like, your little icon. Well, the URL path is profile, and then whatever username I put is a variable they're going to call out on, and then avatar. What if I name my username etc password? Then when I click my profile and I ask it for something, right? What happens? It has to call on that, and it's going to call on something that frankly is doing a command on your machine. So now let's use the file inclusion. Find the name of a user on the system that starts with B. So we're going to go ahead and copy this. We're going to go over to our exegol. We're going to copy, paste, right? Now we're going to go in here. We're going to open up a browser. Thank you. And this exegol container I have it's built specifically for HackTheBox, so it has the VPN built into it. So it should be connected to the VPN already. So now we will go in here and we'll say, let's copy this. There we go. All right, and we can see we have inlinefreight.com. So this is one of my favorite things, and again, I'm not sponsored by Exegol. It's just one of the things I like about it is I have the attack box spun up. I have Docker containers on my machine that I control, and this one specifically is spun up so that I can always access just HackTheBox whenever I spin it up. All right, so here we go, making it bigger for you guys. And you can see we're going to go to language. We're going to click English. You can click whatever you want. I mean, there's only two options, but you can see it changed it up here to en.php. So what we're going to do very quickly is just see, what are we referencing? Can we just go etc password, or does it need more than that? And you can see, I don't know what that means, but can't access it. So let's try again. So now you can see we added the .. slashes. See if that works. Oh, look at that. That worked. Okay, so what was even the question? Using find the name of a user on the system that starts with a B. Okay, well, the SE password shows every user, so let's just find the one with B. Is it backup? Because that's a user. So let's see. Backup? Nope. So they're looking for an actual user, not like a default. Okay. So backup, bug reporting system. And we could. Barry right there. It was the last one because that makes the most sense. They're looking for a regular user, not a default account. There we go. Okay. Submit the contents of the flag.txt file located in the user share flags directory. Okay. So we're looking for user share flags flag.txt. So we just take this, we say exact same payload, user share flags flag.txt. And there you go. Never trust input. Then we just use our default VNC. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right. Okay, so basic bypasses. Get a drink here. All right, so in the previous section, we saw several different types of attacks that we use for LFI. In many cases, we may be facing a web application that applies various protections against LFI. So now they're starting to look out for this. This is where we start seeing filtering. So what you can see here is they actually have string replace this ... with spaces. So what that means is anytime you see a ... replace it with nothing, because I don't want the ... in here. This is a normal filtering that you see, and you see people doing this because they think, hey, this is going to stop people from trying to do this LFI, which is true until, what do? You double it up. You do force ... and 2 slashes. Why do you do this? Well, let's go back here. Let's open up our, we'll just open up Termux so you can see it. Let me show you. All right, so make this big for you. Thank you. Now, the reason you do this is because you can see you have a ... Whoops. Well, if I have something that actually, when it sees ... takes it out, okay, ... excuse me, slash. Well, if you're looking for ... and you remove that, the filter removes that, what happens if I remove this ... Well, that's what's going to happen. They're going to remove it. Well, if I remove that, now we're left with ... again. So by doubling it up, they're taking them out, and then it's actually correcting itself for me by adding, or by putting all my payload back together. So you can see in here, they're showing that it's 4 dots, 2 slashes, 4 dots, 2 slashes, 4 dots, 2 slashes. And when that happens, basically what you're doing is their filtering system is going to go in and take 2 dots and 1 slash out of each one, and then it's actually correcting the path for us. So it's a way to get past the filtering, right? And you can see, or we can use a backslash and then a forward, right? Because it just depends on how you play with the filtering. And this is something that people do all the time, is playing with that filtering, trying to figure out what it is. Then here's another one, is you can URL encode it. So if you're specifically calling out ... even 4 dots and 2 slashes, etc., I can URL encode it. When I do that, and here they're using Burp Suite's decoder tool, and when I do that, you get the full URL encoding. And for one thing to note here is, for this to work, you must URL encode all characters, including the dots. The reason they say this is because sometimes when you URL or encode stuff, it will leave the dots because it's expecting it to be for a URL, and it thinks the dots are part of the URL. So you can see when they do it with the full URL encoding, look at that. Boom. Now it actually works, because the filtering can't decipher this %2e because it thinks %2e, I don't have a filter for that. Okay, so now approved paths. How do we get past the approved paths, right? What if we say, in this case, we only want you to be able to use the languages path, right? Well, look at this, right? It says here, we can examine the requests sent by existing forms, see that the path they use for the normal web functionality. Furthermore, we can fuzz web directories under the same path and try different ones until we get a match. Okay, so basically, you have to use a specific path. Like it's saying, we will sanitize any input that doesn't reference the path we expect. Okay, well, that's an easy bypass because look, I'll reference the path that you expect, which is the directory we're in currently, and then I will then break out of it, right? So that's an easy filter to break because, okay, you're saying I have to reference this, I'll reference it. The hard part that people struggle with here is being creative in the sense of these look very easy when you're getting the errors right in front of you. But if you're not getting anything back, you're going to go, is it filtering out? Is it not vulnerable? What is it, right? And so you have to start figuring that out. All techniques so far should work, okay. Appended extension. So we talked about those appended extensions, right? So a couple of things here, if we can find it here. So what they're talking about here is obsolete with modern versions of PHP, but anything before 5.3 and 5.4, which again, you're going to say, oh, well, then it's not very useful. Go to any company right now and go look at their internal sites. You're going to find a ton of outdated technology. So what they're showing you is some of these methods to fix or get rid of that .php. Well, one of the easiest ways is this path truncation. So this has been around for a while, and basically what you see here is, where's that? Right here. PHP has a maximum length of 4,096 characters. Okay. So what you do is you actually take this directory, right? And then you do your Etsy password, and then you do all these ./, right? And all you're doing is adding characters to it. You're adding null values to it, basically. And you're repeating it, in this case, 20,048 times. The reason you're doing 20,048 is it's 2 characters, so that each equals 4,096. And what it does is it overrides the maximum. So then when they try to append to it, they try to add that .php, it can't because you're already at the maximum. Well, if you don't know, / in Linux just means the directory you're in. So it doesn't mean anything. It means stay here, basically, right? So you're staying here. So, okay, cool. So you do that enough times, and it's basically telling it stay here, and then they try to add the .php, and it can't because .php can't be appended on because it's already at its maximum length, and therefore it gets rid of the .php, and you have access to it. So how do you do that? Well, you got to do this. Echo in whatever directory, Etsy password, right? And then and for I in 1 through 2048, do echo, blah, blah, and it will print it all out for you. And this is something that, again, it's nice to have, like the shortcuts for. Now, on the same thing, PHP versions before 5.5 were vulnerable to null byte injection, which is very similar. You can see, I say very similar in the sense of basically what you're doing is you're adding a null byte at the end because that says, hey, where's it at right here? With a null byte such that the final, where's that? There we go. There we go. It terminates the string. So in PHP back in 5.5, it will terminate the string if you put a null byte. So put a null byte at the end. That PHP doesn't get added on because you terminated the string at Etsy password. So same concept, one overrides, one stops you from appending. Either way, it gets rid of that .php in there. Okay, so let's hop over here and let's try to figure out the actual LFI. In this case, it says here that they employ more than one filter, so let's go ahead and go through it. We'll go ahead and just use these examples above and see what we can find here. So here they're referencing the approved paths. So there's really only 2 filters that they've shown us, right? Approved paths is one, and then up here they're showing how to do like URL encoding and filtering and stuff. But those are the path filters. Those are the same thing. So let's go ahead and we know that. Okay, so the English. So let's just try and do one real quick of just the right and see, and we can see we get nothing. So maybe our path is wrong. So we'll try and include the local path. Okay, so we get illegal path specified. So we get an error. So that means one of our filters requires that language is, right? So let's do Etsy password, see what we get. Okay, so we don't know what else is being filtered, but I always try the 4 slashes. So we'll go ahead and copy and paste that. We've got 4 dots, 2 slashes, 4 dots, 2 slashes, blah, blah. It's Etsy password. Illegal path. Okay, so let's try and put the slash there to make sure that we're on the path that they mentioned, which is the languages path. Okay, so we've got the Etsy password file, but now we need to find, I think it was called flag.txt, just randomly in here. Okay, there you go. $64, I don't know, can't filter, won't stop if LFI, sorry. I don't know what that's supposed to be, but basic filter. Okay, so basic filter. So now we'll copy this out. Okay. That one's actually a pretty fun one, in my opinion, because it actually makes you realize that you got to be a little creative, mess with it a little bit. There's all kinds of filters that you could do, but let's go ahead and keep going. All right. PHP filters. Many popular web applications are developed in PHP. Okay, great. Input filters. So PHP filters are a type of PHP wrapper where we can pass different types of input and have it filtered by the filter we specify. Basically, long story short, they're like this. PHP, blank, and then what type of filter you're going to put. It's telling PHP to expect a certain thing, right? It's a wrapper that's expecting it. You can see here fuzzing for PHP files. So here they're actually using FFUF, and they mentioned GoBuster as well. And they're using a list. In this case, they're using the small.txt list. And they're saying, hey, basically go through on this domain and look for any PHP files on the main thing here, which is the main URL. And it will come back and say, here's the PHP files, right? Index, config, blah, blah. Now, one thing it says is, unlike normal web application, we're not restricted to pages with HTTP response codes of 200, as we have local file inclusion access. So even if we're getting things like 300, 302, 403, because those are forbidden errors, we still want to be able to see them, right? We still should be able to read their source code. And that's because we have local file inclusion. So we may not be able to access them the way we're doing it, but with local file inclusion, we should be able to access them and pull them out. All right. So standard PHP inclusion. So if you try to include any PHP files through LFI, you would have noticed that the included PHP file gets executed. So for instance, if I'm looking at the config file, it's getting executed. Well, that's fine if we want to execute a PHP file, but a lot of times you want to read the code. You want to know how this is working because that's where the real moneymaker is, right? Well, you can have the source code come by using a PHP filter. In this case, PHP filter read and then convert to base 64 and encode. And in this case, the resource is the config file that we just mentioned. So instead of running it, right, show me the code by base 64 encoding it using PHP filtering. Then we just decode it, which is just base 64 decode, right? And then, hey, there you go. Be sure to copy this. Yeah, okay. And then there you go. So then you'll be able to actually do that. So fuzz the web application for other PHP scripts, then read one of the configuration files and submit the database password as the answer. So you want to know why code or storing credentials in code, hard coding them is so dangerous? Things like this, right? I can actually find them and I'll show you. So we go in here. We go here. We say boom. And yes, if anyone's wondering, I love Exegol so far. I am going to do a full review on it, but I want to use it for a while. There's some things I don't like about it for sure. So stay tuned for that. But there's some things I really like about it. And spitting up your own attack box for Hack the Box, for Try Hack Me specifically, and not having to worry about the latency issue that you always run into is really nice. So, okay, so we're in here. We go to English. Okay, so we're in language, English. what are we doing again? Fuzz the web application for other PHP scripts. Okay, so I'm just going to literally copy this because actually, no, I'm not, because I don't know if that's going to, let me see what, I don't know what word lists are in here. So we'll say cd opt, okay, opt, useful. I don't know if useful is in there. Okay, so we'll say cd opt ls, cd lists ls. Okay, so there is some lists, sec lists, and I think that's the same list here. Sec list discovery web content, right? Okay, cd discovery ls web content and directory list. Okay, and we want the small one. And the reason they're probably having you do the small one is because they probably don't want you to have to try and figure it all out. So we want, let's minimize that. Which one did they recommend? Directory list 2.3 small dot text. Okay, I don't see directory list, but that's okay. We'll find another small one. Dir's Cold Fusion, Dirbuster, directory list 2.3 small. There it is. Dirbuster 2007 directory list. Okay, perfect. So we can actually do, yeah, we'll just do that. That's fine. So we'll copy this exact command. The reason I'm copying it is I don't really want to build it out. Okay. Come over here. Okay. Now we'll say there. And we will say port is, what is the port for this? 94.237. So we'll just leave this right here. That's easy for me to mess with. The port is 55862. Server IP should be 94.237.55.43. Now we just have to fix the list because that is not the same list that we have. So everything's the same except for we go into opt. What was it? Opt lists. Then sec list, then discovery, then web content, then it goes into Dirbuster 2007 underscore directory list 2.3 small dot text. All right, I think we've got it right. Let's find out. Okay, there we go. It is going. So it's basically going through, trying to find directories that match that. And in this case, if you notice in the actual command, we put in here fuzz.php. What that means is I don't want to see anything that's not PHP. So we're going to let this run. And as it's running, we're going to go through here. It says fuzz the application for other PHP scripts and then read one of the config files and submit it. So we need to go ahead and prep our filter here. Okay. And once we prep our filter, we'll go through and we will find our, right here. Here's going to be our filter. This is the, hopefully this is the new site. Let me make sure. 94, 237, 55, 43, 43, 55862, 55862. Okay, so this is a new site. So we're going to go ahead and copy and paste our new filter in there. Put that right here. Okay, and then we just need to change this resource to whatever the resource is we want. And once we do, we should be able to read the config file and be good to go. All right, so just got to wait for this. So we'll let this run. And then as soon as it's done, we will come back and show it. Okay, so as you can see, there's only one, and it's configure. You have index, but there's configure. And then just because I didn't actually think that was the only one, I went to it. I put that in here, right? So I did our regular, I just copied the PHP filter, put it in here, put resource equals configure. And sure enough, it is the only one. So I copied it over here. My only concern is this the whole thing, which I'm going to try and make sure here. But now we'll go in here and CyberChef, we'll get rid of this. And we will say, nope, not that. Which I'm not sure why that copied when this is in my clipboard here. Okay. We will copy this. Copy. Paste. Okay, still, give me 1 sec. Let me paste that over there. Okay, I'm not sure why that's doing that, but okay. We'll just copy this. Okay. Hopefully this is good enough. Now we'll say base 64 from base 64. And okay, so we've got part of it. The problem is, how do you get the whole thing here? Right? Do we Control all, copy, and then put it in here? Not necessarily how I want to do things, but we can get rid of this and this. There we go. And there you go. If you look, database username is root. And I know that's small for you guys. Database username is root. And the password or the thing is hack the box, never store plain text creds. Correct. Never do that. Now we go ahead and put that in here. And I just did the wrong thing again. If you guys have ever watched my videos, I've been doing this for years. And I've never gotten better about copying and pasting the right thing. All right. So as you can see, you can actually get config files, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but you find things like this a lot. And then even if you don't find them, what you find is how it operates, which means now I know how to take advantage of it. So now we're going to go ahead and talk about PHP wrappers. So then this is basically what we just talked about, right? Is the checking PHP configs. We just did that. That's how you get the PHP config. You can see they're actually referencing specific configuration files to see how it's configured, which makes sense. And then when they do, they go in here and they're looking for allow URL include. The reason they're looking for this is because if you can include a URL, what can you do? Well, I can do RFI, which is remote file inclusion, which means I can actually tell it, hey, go to this site and run something, right? And you can see here, echo command base 64. So what they did is they took that PHP system get command, and that is a basic command shell, and they're saying base 64 encode it. And then when they put that in here, right, data, that's the actual filter here, is text plain base 64. And they put that in there. And then at the end, they put CMD, because if you look at how this is written, it's looking for a command variable. That's what it's looking for. It's going to put that in there. So you have to tell it. And in this case, they put ID. And when they did, it gives them the user ID. So we may also use curl. So they're using curl for the same attack if you want. For the video, it's easier to see if I do it on the screen. So you'll see that. Similar to the data wrapper, the input wrapper can be used to include external input and execute PHP code. So you can see there's the same thing, right? The difference is they did a post request here. Now, the reason this is different is they're just showing the difference in the input or the input wrapper versus the data wrapper. The data wrapper is for a GET request. This is for a post request. You can see the difference, right here. So here it is in here, and you can see this is the data wrapper, blah, blah. The difference, what you see is right here. If you notice, this is all in the URL theoretically, right? A GET request is all done in the URL. This is actually done in POST, meaning this is the data you're sending to it. That's basically the difference. Okay. If you've ever looked at packets from a GET request or a POST request, the GET request is all in the URL. The POST request, you have to view the packet to see the data that's being put in there. So then you have your expect wrapper, right? Which allows us to directly run commands through URL streams. So you say echo, blah, 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 all that crap, right? Base64 decode and expect. Are they able to expect, right? And in this case, they are. So the extension configuration is enabled, or is it used to enable it? Excuse me. So we know that the expect command works, or the expect wrapper, excuse me. So you can see here, they're going to go ahead and say curl, blah, blah, index language equals expect, and then they can just run commands. It's that easy. You can just type ID and it will run it, right? So very easily, you can start running commands using this if you know how it works. So we'll go ahead and try to gain remote code execution using one of the PHP wrappers and read the flag. Well, I'll just tell you for my own peace of mind, I'm just going to try and use this one first because that'd be awesome if this one worked because it's much easier, right? So we'll go ahead and close that. We'll go ahead and leave that open for now. We'll go ahead and I can get it. There we go. Okay. So put that here. And again, do I think this will work? Probably not, but it would be cool if it did. Okay. So now we can just go over here to port and IP. I don't think this will work. It would be sweet if it did because it would make my life so much easier. Let's see. Okay. Doesn't look like it did because I ended up just getting the normal page. So didn't work. Okay. Can't say I'm super surprised. They weren't going to give us the easiest way out, right? So what we're going to do is, and we could read the config file and find it, right? Obviously. We're going to use the GET request first to see if that works. And you can see here is the GET request language equals, and this is the wrapper data, and that's command ID. And we will go back to the page. Actually, I have to get let me get this first. Copy that. Since it is a new page, go here, go to English. Okay, thanks. Now we should go there, go here. All right, let's see if it works. Okay, that worked. So we've got ID. So we found our wrapper that works. Try to gain and read the flag at root. So CMD is cat, I guess it's just flag. Yeah, that didn't work because of the space, which is fine. We can do I can't remember for some reason why I can't remember this, but what is URL encoded space? It is %20. Okay. So we can say cat %20 to URL encode it and see if, I guess it would be flag, or is it flag.txt? Okay. Okay. It says read it at root, right? Read the flag at root. Okay. Let's just try and do ls %20. And we'll say, I guess at root, right? Okay, here's the flag. That's why I couldn't read it. What the hell? What an insane flag. Okay, I thought it was just going to be called flag. I guess not. So now cat. And we'll put a %20 in there. So what I'm doing is URL encoding it. %20. I don't know that that's a real thing. Okay, that didn't work. So let me try and do ls again. There's no flag here, so I don't know. Not sure what's going on there. Cat. That is the flag, supposedly. But it's not reading it. Okay. Code execution on the PHP. Read the flag at that. Okay. Well, I'm assuming that's the flag. I don't know. Let's say we know it works because I can run other commands, right? So let's try and cat etc password. Okay, so that works. Oh, I'm an idiot. I didn't put the direct reference to it like that. Duh. I'm an idiot. All right, so hack the box. I can't read that. DI $ remote URL included. Okay, thank you. So pretty easy if I could learn to type. Just got to finesse or mess around with it a little bit. But these are some of my favorite attacks because a lot of times it's just developers not fully understanding. Okay. Now we're on remote file inclusion. Remote file inclusion, same exact concept. Difference is I can do it remotely, which means I can go host a file somewhere else, a remote file, and you will run it when you go to it, right? Because you will access it. So here you can see they're just searching the config file to see if the allow URL is on. If it is, in this case, we can, if you notice, they reference HTTP itself, port 80, index.php. So you notice they're actually referencing a completely, even though it's a local host, they're referencing a totally different remote file. And it's loaded because this is the site. So they just reference their own site. So that way, one thing to keep in mind, it says it here, is don't do this normally because it can get caught in a loop. And when it does that, you're going to DOS the thing. So what you're going to do is here, they created their own little shell. Okay, pretty easy. Then they hosted it using Python 3. Let me make sure I don't have to start it. Yep, I do. Okay. Okay, where'd we go here? All right, so we're going to copy this because we're going to need our own shell. And we're going to say, oh. There we go. And I want the shell.php, but I want to, before we do that, I want to move into home directory. So I'm not. All right, there we go. So now we should have in here our shell.php right there. Okay, now we're going to host it. So we're going to say Python 3 tech-im http.server. And I think it's 8,000 by default. We'll just leave it there. Yep, 8,000. There we go. Now we have to find our IP, which I don't know the IP here off the top of my head. So we'll have to figure that out. Come on, just give me, there we go. Let's do another one. We'll say, we'll just move it to the right. Right's fine. Oh, I moved it to a workspace instead of what I wanted. Okay, so whatever. There we go. Okay. I don't remember the Terminator commands. Give me one sec. I don't like Terminator. I actually hate it. It's one of my pet peeves with this. Cheat sheet. So I just need to look up the cheat sheet for. See, I don't even want to split them that way, but all right, it's fine. We'll split it. Okay, so we have our Python server running here. Now here we need to go over here and actually go to it, right? If you guys don't understand what's happening, all that's happening is we're going to here and we are referencing, in this case, right, our there we go. We're just referencing the actual file itself, which is on our machine. So you can see here, we're going to go to this first. So this is just your normal, should be the same site. We're going to go to language, we're going to go to English, then we're going to go back up. Where'd it go? There we go. Where'd it go? Okay, right here. And so here you can see they're trying to reference it with FTP. I don't want to reference it with FTP. I want to use HTTP. So there we go. So all we're doing is adding this at the end. So we're saying here's our IP, our listening port, and then the shell.php. So now we're going to go back here. We need to minimize this so I can see. This is our IP, 1010, 15, whatever. Go back here. We're going to put that in here. There you go. And then the port was 8000 because that is the default port for Python simple shell, or simple server, excuse me. And we do command ID, and you can see it runs. Now, how's that work? Well, we're hosting a PHP shell, right? If you remember, that's this shell right here. We're hosting it, but you're allowing us to remotely reference it. Your server reaches out, connects, and you can see that because if you look at who reached out. Our server is 10.10.15.112. That's our host. The server that reached out is 10.129.29.114. That is where they're hosting this site. So their site reached out and connected and ran the shell. So attack the target, gain command execution, and then look for the flag under one of the directories in there. So all we have to do is go back here and say we want ls, whoops. We got bin, boot, and it said, look for the flag under one of the directories. Okay, which is, I guess we'll do exercise first because that's crazy. They're just gonna have us searching through the year. Okay, I don't see anything in there, so we'll just do ls. We could try home. Nothing. If we get another one with nothing in it, we're going to see if we're doing it incorrectly. Okay, so there is something in them. Okay. So we'll just do it in order now. Bin. I don't see a flag though. Okay. And then we can try the root. Nothing. Okay. So we did bin. We're not going to do boot. It'd be crazy if they did boot. We'll do var. Nothing. Unless they're saying it's just somewhere in there. We can do temp. Temp's pretty, makes sense. Nothing. Okay. Where is this bad boy? So we did bin, boot. We haven't done dev. We did exercise. Did I spell exercise wrong? Maybe I spelled exercise wrong. I feel like I always spell exercise wrong. There it is. See, anyone that watches this, I will tell you, I have spelled exercise wrong my entire life. And it is not getting better. So exercise flag.txt. There you go. Now the question is that the flag? Are they going to let us submit that? Or do we have to decode it before we can submit it? That's the question. Oh, no, that was it. They let us take it. Okay. Now, LFI and file uploads. So let's go ahead. We probably have to start one. Yep. Okay. So now this one is pretty self-explanatory, right? If you have the opportunity to upload a file, there's a risk there, right? So you can see, depending on the function in PHP, in Node, in Java, whatever, it depends on what you can do, but they all actually allow you to read and execute if there's vulnerable. So the file upload attack module, blah, blah. Okay, so there's a whole nother module for that if you want to read it. Image upload. It's very common, right? Almost always you can upload an image to sites for profiles, those types of things. You can upload images. It makes sense, right? You should be able to upload images. Well, the file on its own is harmless in this case, but you can see they actually are using the same command shell, but they're naming it .gif, right? Okay, cool. When they upload it, nothing looks out of ordinary right here. It's uploaded, right? Once they uploaded it, if you look here, the image source, okay, so to include the uploaded file, we need to know the path. So we have to figure out where is it storing them. If it's in a profile or something, usually in this case, profile images. So we need to know it because we need to reference it, right? Now we just go to it. Look at that. We reference it. And guess what? It runs our command. So let's go ahead and, in this case, it said use any of them. They're all the same. They're just different techniques of the same, meaning you can see they're using a zip file, a GIF file, and in this case, a FAR file. Any of them work. Any of them are the same concept. It's just what is available. So we're going to go ahead and try and use the first one. Okay, so here's this, English, perfect. Now we'll have to find where we can, there we go, profile settings. I was going to say, we'll have to be able to upload a file. So we will go back and we will say, right here, echo shell.gif. Okay, go back here. We can stop doing this. Okay, there we go. Clear that. We can say copy, paste. I don't know why that line's there. Okay, and then that should create shell.gif, right? Now we have shell.gif. Now we go here and we upload it. File not allowed. Well, we didn't even add a file, so what do you mean not allowed? Okay, that was interesting. Shell.gif will allow it. Now we just have to go in here and we'll just open a new tab so we can see it. And we'll go to English. And now we just reference it. So now we just reference, and hopefully it's in the same path that they mentioned. I don't know that it is. I don't want to look for it, to be honest with you, so hopefully not. Okay, no, come on. That's on me, that's on me. Okay, so hopefully it's in the same path. It is not. That sucks. Okay, so file not allowed. Okay. Upload. Okay, so it's successfully uploaded, and I think we named it shell.gif. There we go. So it is in the same one. I just had to click upload, so it works. So now we just say, so even though it's a GIF file, an image file, whatever, it worked because it's running it as PHP because we told it to. Read flag at that. Okay, so now we just say command equals ls. Boy. All right, there's our flag. Keep in mind the GIF 8 is part of the file, so you don't need to do that. Okay. That says hack the box, upload, LFI, execute, remote code execution. Perfect. Pretty easy. If you guys don't fully understand it, by all means, let me know. Basically, what you're doing is you're using the same shell for all of these. The difference is the technique of how you're doing it. So if you can upload a file and reference it, I can execute. So the point of it is, right, sometimes you can do local file inclusion, but how do I execute a command? Because all I can do is reference a file, but I can't do remote code execute or remote file inclusion, so I can't reference one of my own files. But if I can upload a file to their server and then reference it, I can get it to execute, right? So that's kind of the idea here, right? Okay, log poisoning. So this is by far my favorite attack of all time. The reason it is because it's one of my it's one of those things that someone, when I've learned it, I was like, how did someone think of this? Because it's one of those things that, like, it's when it happens, you go, like, when someone shows it to you, you're like, no crap, of course it's going to do that. But we've all operated on this mentality of like, logging is never bad, right? Like, I remember I learned this later in my career, and literally thinking, I always want to check logs. I always want to make sure logs, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at logs totally different after this. And that's why I liked it. I just thought the way someone thought this through, and the way it like clicked in their brain, it literally is one of those moments that literally clicked in my brain. And I went, oh, like, that's how it's done. And it was just such a mind opening experience of how you can be so creative in cybersecurity, especially pen testing. It's incredible. So most web applications utilize session ID cookies. Okay, that's true. Well, guess what? Your cookies are stored in the logs in this case, right? So what they're saying here is, hey, here's your PHP session ID, right? And then you can see they're actually using LFI to reference the logs, and you notice they can check the session log based on the cookie identifier, right? So NHN, blah, blah, all that stuff, right? And you'd have to check your own here. Let me make sure that I don't have to, yep, I have to do that. So we'll go ahead and keep talking. So basically, your session ID correlates to the log ID. So they're referencing it so that they can actually look at the log ID here. And if you notice, it tells them what you did. You went to en.php. So, okay, cool. Thank you. Well, if you look here, they named their language equals session poisoning, right? You were going to en.php, but you just named it session poisoning. Even if that doesn't exist, it's still in the log, session poisoning, right? And I will tell you, I've seen some extremely creative ways to do log poisoning that is also beneficial. So take that with what you will, but there's some creative things you can do with log poisoning. And that's why it's one of my favorite things. It's super creative the way you can utilize this. So this time the session file contains session poisoning instead of ES. It says session poisoning. Okay, you're going to say that's no big deal. Who cares, right? But look, language equals %3c, blah, 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 all that is encoded, right? So this is a URL encoded web shell with command equals ID, right? So you can see here, you're putting this command shell in the logs. Then when you call the log and you put a command, guess what? It runs it. So it logs the command, and when you reference it, you're giving it the input for the command, and you can actually execute remote code. That is, in my opinion, one of the coolest attacks. If that doesn't get you fired up, I don't know what will. That is so cool to me. We're going to copy this because this is what we're going to do. I actually did not learn the PHP version of this first. I learned the Apache version of this, which we talk about here. You can see here's the var log Apache access log. And when you go through it, yeah, you get all your logs, but you notice, what's it logging? User agent, IP, all that stuff. Okay, what can I change in Burp Suite pretty easily? User ID, cookie too, but I can just change the user ID. Well, what do I change the user ID to? What if I change it to that PHP system shell? And then when I reference the log, boom, there you go, right? Very, very cool attack. I love this attack. So we're going to use because I don't want to start up Burp Suite and everything, we're going to use the other version of it. So let's go ahead. All right, so here we are. We're going to go language, English, okay. And then we're going to go back up. We're going to say, here is the code we want. There we go. This should put it in our log. Okay, so we put it in our log. Now we will have to inspect and we'll have to find, I want to edit the cookie, but I want to look at the storage. There we go. Cookie, because here's our session ID. I need to copy that because I need that, right? And so then when we go to reference it, we're looking for this, copy. And so we will say equals. And what we're doing is we're just getting rid of this. I don't know why it's making me do the %, but we're saying, excuse me, that we want to reference the var, library, PHP sessions, session, and then here is where we're going to, I don't want to delete it. There we go. Copy that. And then that's our session ID because that's our cookie. And then we're going to say and command equals whatever we want. So and command equals, in this case, ID. And we should, boom, we just executed command based on the logging. That is so cool. Like, think about that. We literally stored a shell. And if you're wondering, these attacks repeat themselves. Like, AI has done this where you give it an instruction and it actually executes on the back end. And it's, I mean, this is a cool shell, or a cool attack, right? So use any of these, submit the output of the following command. We have to do each one each time. Okay. So we will say 211. So we'll get rid of this. Get rid of all this. We have to add it every single time. So we'll do this one. Okay. And then we'll copy this all out because copy that. Okay. Now here we can say present working directory. There we go. Okay. Var www HTML. So you have to re-poison it every single time for this one. So var www HTML. So again, that's on me. But now read the flag at whatever. Okay, well, we got to poison it again because every time you do the log, it updates, and that makes sense. So we poison it, and then we say, we copy this, and we say, we want, nope, okay, interesting. All right. Going back and forth with it. Okay, so we want this. We poisoned it, and we want the command to be ls/. Here we go. There's the flag. Copy that. Okay. Just put this here so that we have it. Okay. Then we now we poison it one more time, and then we should be good. Okay, there we go. Poison it. Now we go here and we say cat text. Okay, that's blank, so that wasn't it because I'm an idiot and didn't reference the path. Okay. So, do it again. Poison it one more time. And Burp Suite would be much easier for this, by the way, if you guys are wondering. But I'm not going to spin Burp Suite up just for this 10 minutes. So we'll say %20. Okay, it put that space in there, so that makes me nervous. Okay, it worked. There we go. Hack the box should never be exposed. Okay, perfect. 1095 should never be exposed. I'm really bad at reading those, so I apologize if you wanted to read it. Okay, automated scanning. So now they're talking about just using automated scanners. We already saw these lists, and what they're doing here is they're actually going in and fuzzing the value. And basically, in this case, the HTML forms users can use on the web app front end tend to properly tested, well secured, blah, blah, blah. However, the page may have other exposed parameters that are not linked to any HTML forms, which is true. The forms are usually the things that people check on the most for obvious reasons. This is why it's important to fuzz for exposed parameters, as they tend to not be as secure as public ones. Thank you. Okay, so here they're just using the word list, and in this case they're using the burp parameters name.text, and they're fuzzing the actual value there. And in this case they're getting, doesn't look like they got a response yet or anything, but once we identify an exposed parameter that isn't linked to any forms, so basically this parameter fuzz equals value, that's like the language equals whatever equals, right? So that's all they're saying, is they're looking for those. When you find them, because they might not be linked to forms, which is an example is this, when you go to language English, that's not really a form, right? If we go to language English, I think I restarted the machine, yeah, so copy this, we need to go to it anyway. So if I go up here, I go to the website, and I go to, there is no English in this one, so can't select it. But if there's a form, how would I know that exists, right? I have to go ahead and fuzz the application. Okay, welcome back. So we're going to talk about automated scanning now. And in my opinion, they did this quite a disservice by not really explaining it. So one of the big things is FFUF is a really good tool, right? But you got to understand how to use it. They don't show you how to use it in here. They just try to like really quickly go through it. And so you might be very confused when you're running this. And so I want to talk about it. So first thing first that we're going to do is we're just going to run this command. What they're saying with this command is, if you look, they're going to reference the index.php here, and then they're putting the fuzz there. We're inserting words from a word list, and we're trying to see if we get a response, right? Well, that's good. The big thing is we're looking for a different response than normal, right? We're looking what is different if you put a parameter in there, right? So fuzz, whatever word we want, equals, and then put a value and see if we get a response. So that's what the tool is going to do, right? So we're going to go ahead and do that now so you can see the results. And this one definitely took some troubleshooting, and I'll show you why. So first things first, the first thing I did was switch here. You can see the W or the TAC-W burp parameter. So I have to change that because I'm in a different directory. So we'll say this, we'll say opt secret, or whoops, what is it? Lists. I think it's lists on here. Let's see if this will work. Lists. Okay. And then I think it's sec lists, and then it's discovery maybe. Yep. Discovery, and then web content. And then I think this is actually the name of it, burp parameter names.text. And then you can see I'm putting the URL, and you notice it says FS. That is the file size, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to hit enter. And if I did it right, yep. All of these are coming back, if you notice, as size is 281. So what we're looking for here is we're looking, because they're all coming back as well, this one's coming back as a 403 error, probably because if you look, I bet I did it on, yeah, I didn't do the index.php. So what we need to do, I did it on server status, which server status is another directory in here, but that's all right. So what we'll do is we'll actually change this to index.php, and then that should change it. So now we're getting 200 errors, which are, or status codes, excuse me, which are saying it's good. But if you notice, the size is 2309 on all of them. That means the response is you're getting the exact same response every single time, which means I doubt every single word in here is an acceptable parameter. Maybe, but I doubt it. So what we're looking for is something with a different response. And if you scroll up, it doesn't take long. You can see really quickly, we'll find it. There's one. View 1935. A different response is view. So quickly, we're going to go, okay, cool. We have it. We have the actual parameter we need, which is here 1935, or I'm sorry, is the view. So view equals, right? So now we're going to go in here and we're going to use the word list jhaddix, right, from the fuzzing LFI. and we're going to put in there, and you notice it says FS for file size. Well, we want to make sure we have the 1935 in there, not the 2287. So we'll go back here, and we will do this very quickly. And look how easy. Well, this one I already have I'm already in the directory, so I don't know if you guys can see this, but there we go. I have file size is 1935. So quickly, I'm doing index.php, but then I'm putting that parameter in there of view, and I'm putting the fuzz there, and I'm putting file size is 1935. So what it's going to try and do now is use this LFI JHADX to test all the LFI techniques that it knows and tell me which one works. You can see it's running through them, and here we're getting them, right? So quickly, you can grab any of these. I grabbed this one. Doesn't really matter. And you can see I grabbed it, put it in there, and boom, I get the Etsy password. Well, what's it asking us to do? Read the flag.txt. Well, okay. So let's go ahead and view flag.txt. There you go. Pretty easy. The automated scanning one, the reason it throws you for a loop is because you get all the results, but you don't understand what you're looking for because they don't explain it. And I think they do you a disservice there. What they're looking for is the size. You're basically looking for a different response because all of them are giving you the same thing. One of them doesn't, which means something's different on that one, right? All right, we're going to go ahead and do the automation prevention, file inclusion prevention, and then we're going to do the skill assessment later in the week so that another video will do the skill assessment because this video is very long and I want to give you guys time to work through it, and then I'll do the skill assessment and then I'll upload both of them together. So file inclusion prevention, the most effective thing we can do is reduce file inclusion vulnerabilities to avoid passing any user-controlled inputs into any file inclusion functions or APIs. So the page should be able to dynamically load assets on the back end with no user interaction. You shouldn't specify what file it needs, right? That's kind of the whole point. In some cases, this may not be feasible. Makes sense, right? There's times we might have to, right? Whole architecture. In such cases, we should utilize a limited whitelist. So instead of, it's kind of like SQL where you have predefined queries. Instead of saying, run this query and letting the user fill it out, say you could only run this or this, right? That's what they're talking about with LFI. Don't give the user the option to change it. Keep to this, or this, right? Those are the options. Preventing directory traversal. If attackers can control the directory, they can escape, right? Obviously. So as we've discussed about the module, directory traversal could potentially allow attackers to do any of the following. The best way to prevent this is to use programming languages, built-in tools to pull only file name. For example, PHP has base name, which will read the path and only return the file name portion if only a file name is given. So basically, secure coding practices, right? If you create your own function to do this, it's possible you're not accounting for a weird edge case. For example, if your bash terminal, you go into your home directory and run the command boom, 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 you'll see bash allows for those wildcards to be used. Now type PHP tech A to enter the PHP command line interpreter and run those. You'll see PHP does not have the same behavior and doesn't operate the same. The command will work as expected. It demonstrates an edge case, meaning you may think you're securely coding it, but the PHP and all these different languages have built-in functions for this because they want security first. And I say they need security first, right? So if you are trying to do these workarounds, and when I say do these, if you don't think the function exists, do some research because it probably does, right? So if you're trying to do, if you're like, hey, I want to secure this, I think here's probably best practice, and you're just kind of putting some of your own code in there to do that, you're probably going to run into these edge cases where someone finds that little flaw that gets around it and you're not aware of it. Web server configurations, right? Turn off the allow URL open, right? You do not want, and the URL include, you do not want them to be able to access a remote code or remote file, And even if you need it to function, try and see if you can get around that, right? It's also possible to lock web applications in their web root directory, preventing them from accessing anything else. So how do you do that? Run Docker. If your website runs in Docker, unless you do some sort of escape, it's not accessing the backend server. It's running on its own container, meaning it can only access what's in that Docker container, right? So it prevents a lot of the edge cases where you're getting LFI and things. So web application firewall, this is a no-brainer, but if you have a web application firewall, have security, deal with WAFs. Most importantly, avoid false positives, block non-malicious requests. Mod security minimizes false positives by offering permissive mode, blah, blah, blah. Basically, they're telling you best practices, right? The key here is what I see most often is people don't do these internally. They do this a lot externally on the perimeter, right? You see a lot of public-facing websites. They don't have as many vulnerabilities, but then you get these internal sites that have them, and it allows for lateral movement very quickly. So be aware of that and try and compensate for that. All right, so now answer the questions. So we got to spawn this. It says SSH to this with, why would we SSH in and do this? I don't know, but let's go ahead and do it. So what is the full path to the php.ini file for Apache? Well, I mean, we can just go to here. I think it actually said the full path. I hate my mouse sometimes. So what was the question? What is the full path to the php.ini file for Apache? Okay, let's see if we have it. php.ini file. I swear it said it earlier somewhere. Maybe it didn't. I don't know. Okay, maybe it didn't. I thought it did, but that's okay. Okay, so SSH in with user hack the box. And what is the full path to the php.ini file? Well, let's just see. Let's just do this. Where is the Etsy PHP? Yeah, it did show this earlier. We just have to find the actual which one it is. So we will go ahead and go in here and say SSH. Copy that. Using hack the box student. So SSH hack the box student at there, and it should ask me for password, which will be hack the box. Okay, there we go. So we should be able to say cd etsy php cd php and 7.4 cd apache 2 cd php ini. Okay, so okay, there we go. So there's the full path, and then php.ini. What a weird question. I don't know why they threw that one in there. Edit the PHP ini file to block system, then try to execute PHP code, read the var logs, and fill in the blank. System has been disabled for, let's just see if we can guess it. Security reasons. Wow, that was tough. You can pretty much guess it, right? So what they're saying is edit the php.ini file, block system, don't allow it. Try to execute the PHP code that uses system, and it'll say it's been disabled for security reasons. Not rocket science. You guys probably would have guessed that. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. The next one, we're going to go through this whole skill assessment and do the scenario and walk through the whole thing. So hopefully this helps you guys. Hopefully you guys learn something and have a great day. Thanks.